Hello guys, Croft is here. Today we'll delve into the theory that Meredith Vickers from Prometheus is actually an android, an idea cryptically supported by Ridley Scott himself, who said that there might be two androids on board. Besides this almost direct confirmation from the director, many other details from both the film and supplementary materials point to the fact that Vickers might be an android or a replicant. And Vickers' inability to outrun the juggernaut ship could be explained by the fact that she's programmed to believe that she's a human. So there are several pieces of evidence that Vickers is a synthetic. For example, the Prometheus files that reveal that the real Vickers died in 2049. There is also the commentary of Ridley Scott and Lindelöf where they say that there is way more to Vickers, in addition to many other proofs. In hindsight, if we closely examine Vickers' behavior, it becomes obvious that she is an android, or more likely, a replicant. First of all, there's this cryptic statement from Ridley Scott himself. At a conference, when asked about if there is a robot in the film, Scott said that there might be two androids aboard the Prometheus.
Speaking of robots, there is a rumor about this movie that there is a robot in Prometheus. Is this accurate? Will you confirm that here for us today?
That may be two. That may be two.
Officially, Prometheus only confirms David as synthetic, but Vickers is the next prime candidate. Other crew members like Shaw, Holloway, Yannick, and others are consistently portrayed as human, each with backgrounds and emotional arcs. Vickers, by contrast, remains cold, mysterious, and heavily involved in the mission's corporate side, and stands out by her tension with both David and Wayland. Scott likes to introduce ambiguity like he did in Blade Runner, suggesting that Rick Deckard might be a replicant without giving a definitive answer in the original cut. Similarly, the Alien films often played with the idea that androids may hide among humans. So Ridley Scott's message that Vickers might be an android or a replicant actually becomes obvious in hindsight, so let's break down and explain all pieces of evidence proving that she is a synthetic. From the very start, Prometheus reveals that David is a Wayland Corporation android with an eerie, calm demeanor, advanced intelligence, and a certain detachment from human emotions. Because the audience is shown early on that David is synthetic, most viewers naturally assume that everyone else on the crew is human. If Vickers turned out to be an android, it would be a clever narrative twist. The very fact that the film discloses David's artificial nature from the start distracts us from suspecting anyone else. This misdirection is reminiscent of Alien of 1979, where the crew and the audience do not realize that Ash is synthetic until the third act of the film. In Prometheus, we have David, openly known as an android, so there is very little reasons to suspect that Vickers might have the same origins, which is exactly why this second twist would be so effective. Since there are so many clues to talk about, this video is going to be quite long, so if you'd like to watch it without ads, consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you can watch or listen to all my videos ad-free in the background. In addition to providing huge support to this channel, you'll also get access to hour-long lore videos, timelines, and other in-depth breakdowns. Perfect for listening on the go or with your phone locked. But now let's get back to the video. Another piece of evidence is in the naming pattern of androids throughout the Alien saga. In Alien, the android is Ash, in Aliens in Alien 3 it's Bishop, in Alien Resurrection it's Cole, and in Prometheus it's David. So there is a clear alphabetical pattern with the first letters in androids' names, A, B, C, D. Then Alien Covenant introduces Walter, a sudden jump to W, which might be confusing, but it could be that Ridley Scott skipped most of the letters to finish the alphabet. If we believe that Vickers may be a synthetic, her name begins with V, placing her right before W. After Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott had initially planned 3 additional films, but those projects were ultimately cancelled. So we can speculate that he intended to introduce more androids with names starting with X, Y, and Z, extending the established alphabetical pattern to conclude the alphabet and to conclude his Alien saga. Although those sequels never materialized, the name Vickers still fits into the pattern, adding another hint that she may not be human at all, but rather a synthetic. Another crucial moment is when Vickers physically overpowers David, pushing him against a wall to emphasize her authority. Typically, androids in the alien universe possess extreme strength beyond human capacity. Bishop, Ash, David, and Walter demonstrate feats surpassing normal human abilities, whether in hand-to-hand conflict or general tasks. For example, in Covenant, David threw Daniels across the room like she was a ragdoll, which is why the fact that Vickers can shove David with ease is so peculiar, and even David himself looks impressed. One may argue that David does not resist, allowing Vickers to prove a point, or that he calculates that it's not worth displaying his full strength. However, it's still really weird that Vickers' push is powerful enough to back David up, underscoring a possibility that she might share his enhanced capabilities. Another and possibly the most important clue appears in Mother promotional materials released alongside Prometheus. The studio released an interactive Mother interface that you can ask questions, offering Easter eggs and supplementary lore. And the crazy thing is, when you ask Mother about Meredith Vickers' date of death, the interface lists June 29, 2049. An obvious contradiction if this same Vickers is alive in 2093 during the events of the film. I don't think we can just dismiss this as a continuity error. I think this is pretty much the proof that the real Vickers died decades before Prometheus, with the version we meet in the film being an android or a replicant commissioned by Wayland himself to preserve his daughter. Corporate secrecy and hidden experiments are long-standing themes in the alien universe, so Wayland could have used his resources to replicate his deceased daughter. Vickers herself probably doesn't even know that she's an android, and her identity might be formed from the memories and personality of the real Vickers, who passed away long before the Prometheus mission. I think it's way more likely that Vickers is a replicant, or at least that's what she was supposed to be in the early stages of production. In the Blade Runner universe, replicants often carry implanted memories to make them believe they're truly human. If Wayland followed a similar approach, he could have endowed Vickers with a fully developed personality and a set of memories based on the real Meredith Vickers. As I mentioned in my other videos, Blade Runner and Alien franchises are actually connected and are in the same universe, which not that many people realize. In Aliens, they literally show on the screen behind Ripley that Dallas worked for Tyrell Corporation. Both films share many of the same technologies, and there are way more other proofs, but it's a topic for another video. But the reason we don't see replicants in Alien movies is because the Alien franchise takes place later in the 22nd century, when replicants are discontinued after repeated revolts exposing the danger of their near-human capabilities. As a result, replicants were banned and replaced by purely synthetic androids like David and Ash. Some parts of the connected timeline are still missing, but it seems like following replicant rebellions, Wayland-Yutani took over the Tyrell Corporation, acquiring all banned replicant blueprints in the process. So Peter Wayland might have used those advanced designs to resurrect his daughter, who supposedly died in 2049. But that's not even it, and there are actually way more proofs. In the film, Vickers wakes up from cryosleep before all other crew members, walking alone through the ship's corridors while David is busy monitoring the crew. In Prometheus, all other humans require assistance emerging from stasis. So it's never fully explained how Vickers managed to wake herself up from cryosleep without any assistance, and even David is visibly impressed. It could be a simple matter of rank. As a high-level executive and partial founder of the mission, Vickers may have demanded a protocol that awakened her earlier than others. In Alien of 1979, the crew also wakes up without any assistance. However, since Prometheus takes place before Alien, the ship probably has less advanced technologies compared to Alien, which is why David is shown operating the cryosleep pods to awaken the crew. If Vickers were truly human, one might think that she would rely on David's assistance. But if we believe the android theory, Vicker's solitary emergence from cryosleep is a subtle hint that she is different from all other crew members. Vicker's overall demeanor is another important factor. She is notoriously cold and unemotional, presenting a sharp contrast to the eager and awe-driven scientists like Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway. She never shows warmth or empathy, which might seem like a personality choice shaped by her corporate upbringing or complicated family dynamics. We can also interpret that her stoicism could be a sign that she's an android struggling to emulate human emotions without truly feeling them. The film leaves many of Vicker's motivations ambiguous, and it seems like the movie wants viewers to keep guessing whether her coldness is simply a personality or a limitation of advanced artificial intelligence, which is why Yannick straight up asks her if she's a robot.
Are you a robot?
My room. 10 minutes.
Which is another moment in the film fueling suspicion that Vickers is not a human. Yannick jokingly asks her if she's a robot after noticing her stiff personality. But Vickers reacts with pronounced offense, and to prove that she's human, she invites him into her quarters for what seems to be an intimate encounter. On the surface, it works as a comedic beat, showing that she's capable of spontaneous impulses and that she's presumably human physically, especially since in the deleted scene she tells Yannick that he was a terrible lay.
You were a terrible lay, by the way.
We can interpret this as her trying to prove that she's not a robot. However, advanced androids and replicants in Blade Runner are extremely lifelike to the point that an intimate contact is not necessarily a reliable indicator of their humanity. If Vicker's design is advanced enough, or if she genuinely believes that she is human, such an encounter proves nothing conclusive. I actually think, on the contrary, her desire to prove that she's not a robot could be a direct indication that she's actually one. This could be a strategic misdirection or an emotional outburst from a being who resents accusations that challenge her identity. The franchise's fascination with androids often hinges on how well they can pass for humans. For example, Ash, Bishop, David, and Cell appear almost normal to the point that many may not notice that they're synthetics unless told. If Vickers is a replicant, she can easily pass for a human at that physical level. So even close intimacy with Yannick might do very little to prove that she is a human. Another puzzling detail is the med pod in Vicker's private quarters. The film reveals that it is calibrated exclusively for male patients. So it seems really odd that Vickers, who spent a fortune customizing her private space aboard the Prometheus, wouldn't have a med pod calibrated for both male and female. She probably anticipated all kinds of hazards on this dangerous mission on an alien world, so why would she have a med pod that's unable to treat her? An obvious explanation is that this med pod was brought specifically for Peter Wayland, who is secretly aboard the ship in a hidden stasis chamber. Since Wayland is male and near the end of his life, maybe the device was set for his body. Yet the film frames the med pod as belonging to Vickers, something that she had installed for her personal use and safety in her private quarters. So in that case, it makes no sense to calibrate it solely to treat men. So if we believe the android theory, the simplest explanation is that she has no real need for a woman's med pod, as synthetic beings might require entirely different medical equipment or none at all. So it's really weird that the med pod is calibrated only for males, since Vickers is visibly extremely concerned about her own safety throughout the film, so if she was actually human, she would probably make sure that the med pod can work for both males and females. Another strong argument for Meredith Vickers being a replicant stems from Peter Wayland's desperate desire for more life. Despite his immense power and technological resources, Wayland apparently has no biological descendants. David is an android and Vickers is possibly a replicant. Shaw is revealed in the movie to be infertile, so there appears to be a population crisis on Earth and people are unable to have children. David, an acknowledged android, clearly cannot continue Wayland's bloodline, and his real daughter Vickers died in 2049, so Wayland turns to advanced bioengineering instead. Given that the film hints at widespread fertility crisis on Earth, it becomes plausible that Wayland was unable to have biological children and a true heir to his empire. So he creates a replicant version of his deceased daughter to preserve some resemblance of a family legacy. And since he cannot continue his blood lineage through children, he desperately tries to extend his own life. This notion actually resonates with the larger narrative of the engineer's own reproductive collapse. The alien master narrative explains that the engineers lost their ability to reproduce, which led them to experiment with the black liquid. So in both cases with humans and engineers, they turn to synthetic or engineered solutions to sustain life. Whether by forging new life forms or extending an individual's lifespan beyond its natural limits. For Wayland, creating Vickers as a replicant is his personal attempt at cheating finality of death. A man who cannot pass on his genes instead pours his ambition into artificial beings and the quest for immortality. This explains why he begs the engineer for more life. Lacking a true heir and faced with a declining human birth rate, he believes that the only path to immortality lies in transcending nature through science, an obsession that is ultimately mirrored and amplified in his secret creation of Vickers. If Vickers is a replicant and doesn't know it, that could give another perspective as to why Wayland hates her. He knows that she's not a real human and resents her that she's not his real Vickers. Like I already mentioned, Blade Runner is connected to Alien, and advanced replicants can be installed with false memories to stabilize their emotions, enabling them to function under the illusion of humanity. Vickers being an android or a replicant would add emotional complexity to her frustration. She wants to be seen as Wayland's rightful heir, overshadowed by creation that is openly acknowledged as synthetic. If Vickers is actually synthetic, that final scene in which she dies beneath the rolling engineer ship might be particularly tragic, illustrating the mortal vulnerabilities even advanced androids face when confronted with cosmic forces. But the film never clarifies any of this, leaving us to speculate, which I think is exactly what Ridley Scott and Damon Lindelöf intended. In the Prometheus documentary, Damon Lindelöf said this about Vickers.
Really important to kind of understand that there's a little bit more to this woman than meets the eye. And then Yannick asked this great question, and I just love the way that Idris performed this.
Hey, Vickers. Hey, Vickers. I was wondering.
Which is, he asked her if she's a robot.
Are you a robot?
I think that in all the Alien movies, much is made of the idea of whether or not the humans are told that there is a robot amongst them. David, we never meant to disguise his robotness or lack of humanity. Everyone is aware, but I was like, wouldn't people on the ship wonder if David was the only robot? And clearly, since David has an attachment to Wayland Corp, and Wayland goes on and on about making robots, and Vickers kind of looks like David, wouldn't somebody ask her if she was a robot at some point?
Although he did not openly admit that she's an android, it seems like the intention was to keep the audience guessing. And since there were so many rewrites of Prometheus, she was probably initially intended to be a replicant. Obviously, not everyone believes this theory, and counter-arguments exist. Her ability to shove David, who exhibits superhuman strength, might be purely cinematic. David could have simply let it happen, or she caught him by surprise. In the same way, her early exit from Cryosleep might simply reflect her executive status and a corporate override, rather than indicating that she's synthetic. The male-only medpod in her quarters could have been calibrated for Peter Wayland rather than for Vickers herself. And her offended response to Captain Yannick's robot joke may be some sort of an insecurity or a comedic beat. We can also speculate that the 2049 death date in Mother Files is a mistake in promotional materials rather than a revelation of Vickers' true identity. But on the other hand, if Vickers is a synthetic copy of Peter Wayland's deceased daughter, his quest for immortality aligns with his larger goal of cheating death. Wayland couldn't accept the death of his daughter, Vickers, so he created a replicant copy of her. In the same way, he couldn't accept his own mortality, so he poured a fortune to the Prometheus expedition to find humanity's creators and extend his own life. But overall, the most striking clues are in the Mother files and Ridley Scott's interview, where he says that there might be 2 androids on board, which in combination with all other clues proves to me that Vickers is not a human. If that's the case, her final scene sprinting away from the rolling juggernaut ship could be read as the tragic end for a being created to preserve a father's lineage, yet doomed to perish as swiftly as any human. We can speculate that her failure to run sideways is a cinematic flaw, or it could be her inability to use any enhanced capabilities she might possess, since she may not even realize that she's an android. Ultimately, there are arguments on both sides, but the question remains open. The film provides enough ambiguity to support both views without outright confirming Vickers' status. However, my personal belief is that Vickers is a replicant that Wayland commissioned to replace his deceased daughter. Vickers' suspicious strength, strange medpod settings, cryptic date of death, and Ridley Scott's comments pretty much prove to me that she's not a human, and that actually makes the story way more interesting in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Do you think she's a replicant or still a human because she couldn't outrun the juggernaut ship? So leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to join the Patreon if you want to give extra support to the channel and be able to watch the videos ad-free and in the background, something that you cannot do on YouTube. Also, like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.